So class, today we are broadcasting from Lionstar Films here in Atlanta. Lionstar is a full-service video production company that I've worked with for many years that I highly recommend if you're ever in need of video production services. They've been gracious enough to host us today to put together this video. And I'm extremely excited to welcome our guest, Ashley Hunt. Ashley is a digital and social media expert with Edelman. Edelman is the world's largest public relations firm, and in my opinion, among the very best PR firms. So with that, welcome Ashley. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So we thought we would tap Ashley's expertise and knowledge in the area of social media and explore some of the concepts and ideas that we're reading about in our text. So Ashley, to kick things off, why don't you tell us a little bit about your role at Edelman and your background?
Yeah, sure. I have been with Edelman for 7 years, and I've been focusing on digital channels and engagement right from the beginning for the last 7 years. So back in 2007, that was really focused on social listening and hearing conversations about what people were saying about your brand and engaging online influencers like bloggers. Blogs were the big thing back in 2007. But since then, the landscape's really changed. So now my role has evolved into counseling clients about just taking advantage of an entire digital footprint, whether that's their website or their Facebook presence or Instagram, not even really just online, social, mobile, everything. So that's a little bit about what we do for clients.
That's great. So one of the things we've been reading about is the principles of success for social media, things like participation and authenticity and transparency. In your opinion, what are some of the critical factors in being successful from a social media perspective?
Yeah, I mean, those are all critical. Those are dead on. But the way that I try to sum that up is just making sure that everything you do centers around some kind of value share or a point of engagement. And that could be a lot of different things that we would consider engaging. That could be humorous content, that could be informative content, or helpful, like an app that helps give some kind of functional benefit to the user. But at the end of the day, you have to be creating value.
There's that saying, a picture speaks 1,000 words.
Right.
What's your thought on the importance of incorporating highly engaging visual elements into the content?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the mandate now. I think Pinterest maybe forced us all into that world, but you've seen Facebook make their format very, very visual. So not even just from an engagement standpoint, we've seen that visuals really perform best on Facebook because they pop in the news feed. So I know I'm speaking just about Facebook, but really that's kind of the new rule of thumb is take your message to the next level. Now it's going to be with video. You know, if a picture's worth 1,000 words and video is going to be worth 5,000. So with Vine and others, I think that's the next territory for people to be creating short form video content on top of visuals. So you better get on top of the visuals now because it's only going to get richer from here.
Do you find it a challenge to help companies curate those visuals? You know, I know that companies are creating their own via infographics and things like that. Or how involved have you been in creating from scratch?
Yeah, I mean, that's a daily request from clients because it is kind of this mandate, and we know that we have to create that type of content to stand out. It can be challenging. I mean, I think a lot of organizations are used to a longer planning process and legal review, and that's a huge hurdle with social when you can't afford the 24-hour legal review. Much less, you know, if there's something trending on Twitter, much less do you have a month to put together the perfect visual to take advantage of it. And some companies are doing it better than others. I think everyone's applauded Oreo for the Super Bowl visual, and that's definitely what we're all striving for. But we've tried to, instead of planning around individual moments, bake into, whether it's our clients' budgets or our own processes, just an always-on approach to having, you know, what we would call a creative newsroom just on hand to help create these visual assets in real time.
Would you say that a good majority of your clients have sort of an editorial calendar for social media? Is that sort of the approach that helps with the always-on function?
Yeah, I think you have to for the most part. I mean, it's too high of volume to create in real time. I mean, we'd all love to have a dedicated role that just sits there and creates content, but with so many complex stakeholders to have to get approvals from, I think a lot of our clients value having an editorial calendar where they can overlay a mix of business milestones that they might need to be addressing from a marketing or PR standpoint with putting some stronger thought behind what content's the most engaging. I mean, I really think planning ahead like that with a calendar is what helps you make sure you've got the right balance of all of your content.
Right. One of the things our textbook talks about is the 9 rules of engagement for social media. Did you have any thoughts on those? Were there any that jumped out that you think, oh, that's
Yeah.
spot on?
Yeah. Well, I thought all of them were spot on. I mean, really, they're all accurate. But what I find is that understanding the basic rules on paper is one thing, but then understanding what that might mean for your brand or for your organization is so hard. And that's what we hope to help our clients with all the time. So I have my notes here for a couple of thoughts that I had on reviewing them. But for one, I think using social media channels as intended is totally accurate. I mean, you can't put a square peg into a round hole. If the channel's designed to engage people a certain way, you should definitely follow those rules. But I think it's also about using the channels in a way that makes sense for your business. So if you're a B2B facing organization, you shouldn't, scream every day and wonder why you're not getting 100 likes on your Facebook photo. Maybe that's not a way that consumers want to engage with your content. Maybe you could just be using Facebook as an amplification channel and not an engagement channel. So you should definitely abide by the rules of those communities, but don't beat yourself up if you're not seeing, as a B2B organization, the same type of engagement on your photo as Starbucks is. You have to understand what suits your needs too.
Do you have clients come to you sometimes and say, oh, we need to be on Twitter? And
Yeah.
after looking at it, they have no business being on Twitter.
Right,
It doesn't
right.
fit with their business objectives.
Yeah.
Do you see that a lot? Is there a lot of coaching?
Especially a couple of years ago, there was a little bit of shiny object syndrome, as we would say. I think Pinterest was the latest, or Vine even. And usually we can find a way to harness those channels to support your business objectives, but it usually comes down to budget. So you have to prioritize what channels you want to be on and what you want to invest your energy in to maintaining. So sometimes, Twitter could be used, but if you really had to prioritize your budget, would you really? And that's usually what we're talking to clients about, is the effort that it would take to maintain that channel well.
Sure. Yep. One of the 9 rules is have a personality.
Oh,
What were your thoughts on that one?
My favorite. I'm glad you asked. I have some thoughts on that. I think you definitely should have a personality for sure, but my favorite thing to talk to clients about is when that could be taking it too far. So for instance, if you're a corporation versus a brand, it might feel a little silly to use emoticons and smiley faces in all of your posts. So having a personality doesn't mean having to take it too far. And then it shouldn't be frivolous or unplanned too. Ultimately it should ladder back up to what your equity is, or it should tap into something that consumers really want to hear from for your brand. And one brand that I think is doing a really nice job of that is actually Quaker. It's hard to make oats really exciting, but they've done a really nice job of using the oat visual, a lot in visual content, to make it into a game sometimes, which is pretty fun and engaging, or they'll have a quirky twist on their stoic Quaker man, but it's very iconic to their brand, but still fun for the end user. And if you can make oats exciting, you can. You've got it figured out.
That's right. Arby's has seen some recent success promoting historical images of like our original sign or a picture of our founders.
Yeah.
It seems that our social audience really enjoys seeing that nostalgia, that historic stuff. I think that'll continue to be part of our strategy.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, to me, nostalgia is one of those core engagement opportunities. And especially in the social space, if you have fans, that means they're already fans of your brand. They're already advocates. So, of course, they would love to see the old signs and all the fun, nostalgic stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, do you see with your clients that the social media function more often lives within marketing or within corporate communications or PR?
Yeah.
Because we've seen that it's challenging when it lives in marketing because corporate communications and PR are typically the owners of the brand voice.
Right.
So if marketing is doing all the social content, they may or may not be in the brand voice. It may come across as a little bit too promotional.
Yeah.
I was just curious if you've seen a lot of that, or if you have a feeling one way or the other
Yeah.
as to where it should live.
Yeah, well, the hard part is I think there are challenges when it lives in PR and communications, and challenges when it lives in marketing too. So one of the challenges when it lives in PR and communications is that you may not have the budgets or the program initiatives that are directly tied to ROI. So whenever we're operating in a silo with a PR team, we may not really get the funding that we need to drive a successful, measurable program, and then you just have a bunch of Facebook posts or tweets, and what does that really do for your brand? But on the other hand, you're exactly right that you really have to be in lockstep with your corporate communications team and your PR team. There are countless examples of where a tweet or a post has gone out without knowledge of broader issues the company might be facing, or an announcement the very next day that they were laying people off, or something that could be very ill-timed. So unfortunately, we all as an industry have to work a little harder, I think, to bridge marketing and PR. And customer service is a very important part of social as well. And I think that's an even more complex layer, is integrating all of your customer service reps who have all of this canned messaging, for issues, especially airlines. Gosh, airlines and baby products, they have to work really hard with their customer service teams on their Facebook or Twitter handle.
Yeah, I think customer service, I mean, it has been completely taken to another
Right.
level with
Right.
social media, and it's amazing, how many consumers just sit back and observe how you're handling these issues
Right.
that come up and how you respond.
Right.
And oftentimes that's what makes news is,
Yeah. How
here's
well you performed.
How well you performed.
Right.
Yeah, it's all very public,
Yeah.
obviously. And we've seen recent examples like the Home Depot and that tweet
Yeah.
that was
Right.
perceived as racist, and ended up costing someone's job and
Right.
costing an agency's
Right.
job.
Right.
So you have to be very careful.
Yeah, it really takes inordinate amounts of just coordination and effort to make sure you're all in step.
So can you share some other examples of maybe some other Edelman clients and how they're using social, and anything that you think is really interesting or
Yeah.
cool that they're doing?
Yeah. Well, one of my clients right now is a technology startup, which has been really interesting, because talk about needing to show ROI. They're every week is a new conversation with their investors to get additional funding. So they're really having to aggressively test their marketing mix and see what's working and what's not. And one thing that was really interesting, because they're a startup, they have low awareness. So we found that their Facebook page was growing with a little bit of paid support, some like ads. They were really growing their Facebook page, which I think was driving some aided awareness to their website. So ultimately, we found some of their Facebook ads were performing a lot better than a Google PPC ad, for instance. So when you're really having to make a splash in a market, in addition to all of the other local or offline tactics you might be employing, Facebook's this nice word of mouth area to get inherent credibility first when trying to drive conversions. So I thought that was really interesting that Facebook ads are outperforming, and driving real conversions for this startup. And then a lot of other clients, it really just depends on their industry. I think a lot of CPG brands are having tremendous success with digital couponing or flash sales to drive some interest. I think Tide has done a really good job of a flash couponing kind of initiative on their Facebook page. And I mean, just like Oats, you got to make laundry detergent exciting too, and you got to drive trial and purchase. And then other brands like an airline, for instance, they're constantly trying to drive signups or purchases through Facebook directly and trying to make it that much easier. So building custom applications on Facebook that you can tag in a more sophisticated way for analytics, that's a huge way of making social a more practical business tool then at that point. Yeah.
The airline client you mentioned, do they get into issues management via social, like delayed flights? And,
Oh yeah.
Okay,
They didn't have a choice, because that's where all of their customers were really complaining about their flight delays. And issues there. So they really, they are one that I just mentioned, and baby products like Graco. I mean, they really have to have their customer service team
Sure.
supporting them with questions about their products or, a flight.
So is it a challenge to kind of balance all that negative with some positive
Yeah.
news from the brand?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And there are tools like Get Satisfaction. I don't know if anyone in your class may be working with them. They're a nice customer complaint or ideas forum that a lot of people see on websites, and they've built in some nice Facebook applications too. So for some brands that see a very high volume of complaints or inquiries, they're trying to drive that off the Facebook wall and putting that in an application just so that your Facebook timeline isn't totally taken over with questions
Sure.
or flight delay issues or things like that.
Yeah. You mentioned ROI, and we've talked about the challenge of ROI in social
Right.
media. Any thoughts on, how you can counsel clients maybe on the front end to start
Yeah.
thinking that way?
Yeah, I think you're right. You have to do it on the front end. So there are ways that it's not an exact science, but there are definitely ways that you can be taking the interactions or the metrics on Facebook and trying to apply them to other, purchase stages, whether it's broad awareness or if we can try to correlate engagement to some kind of advocacy or loyalty. And then same, there are ways to show impact with trial or purchase, but that requires a little more lead time and planning. That means you're having to build an infrastructure like a Facebook tab, for instance, that might have a sign-up engine or offer a digital coupon or something that could be tracked more easily. So I only mention that to say, if you have some very clear objectives for your marketing campaign, work with the internal social team or your agency ahead of time to see how, or if not, social really could be a strong part of that mix, and then give them enough lead time to really build the infrastructures that they could measure against.
What are some of the newer monitoring tools that are out there?
Yeah. Well, we use so many, and there are so many good services that just do a really good job. And in some cases, the best tools are getting bought out by even bigger companies, with such great funding and backing. But like I said, we use so many, but Radian 6 is a favorite for us, and I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that too. I mean, I think they just have such a easy to use, nice dashboard. But Simply Measured is also a company that we work with a lot. They had tools like Row Feeder, which I think is a game changer for measuring Twitter impact. I mean, talk about a Twitter chat or anything where there's just a high volume of tweets and you're trying to calculate the secondary reach of, everyone who participated, what were their followers, and so how many eyeballs could have seen your tweet. Row Feeder exports every ounce of that conversation into a very easy spreadsheet where you can easily tabulate how many tweets and how much reach you had during the Twitter chat. So very simple but life-changing tools like that with
Yeah.
Simply Measured really make a difference, I think.
That's great. For folks in the class who may be interested in pursuing a career in social media, what types of opportunities would you say exist today?
Yeah. Right now, I think a lot of corporations are still trying to, as we just talked about, does it live in marketing or PR? A lot of corporations are still trying to figure out what the titles and the roles are. So I think in-house you'll see a lot of titles that are either PR manager who's been given social media as part of their umbrella, or social media manager in some cases, which is great. From an agency standpoint, we have roles that we carve out just for what we would call community management, the people who would help manage these social communities on behalf of clients and brands. But then we also have, channel strategists and content strategists. So in a sea of social tools and networks, and I'm sure there are going to be 5 more tomorrow, how are you taking a step back and thinking about how you publish out content strategically across all of those, and how are you really designing your channels in a way that you can drive ROI and work with the marketing team. So, something about like a digital strategist, content strategist, something like that would be a really important career path in the future, especially on the agency side.
Right. What are your thoughts on the level of involvement of like an intern level person? When social media first hit, I heard a lot of companies were leveraging interns and,
Right.
and very young folks
Right.
to manage these channels that are ultimately representing the brand.
Right.
Do you feel like there's a place for interns to be involved, or is this, at this point, needs to be a more senior strategic level person?
Yeah. Well, God love interns. We use interns as well, but we would never have an intern posting on behalf of one of our clients, and so I would counsel internal teams not to do that either. I think there usually should be some social media manager who's helping guide, whether it's through their own experience and knowledge of the company and what would be best for the company, or just judgment that you get with years of experience.
Sure, yeah.
I think a lot of companies in the past used to rely on interns as the young people who are digital natives and who get the channels themselves. But Facebook's launched in my freshman year of college, and that was I'm not going to name how many years ago, but I think there are enough very professional people who are also now digital natives who are in their 30s. And so we don't have to rely on interns anymore just to have an understanding of these networks. Facebook is 10 years old now. And so we've got 10 years of background and immersion in that. So I think you should be looking for someone who has experience now with these channels and also a little more senior judgment. But don't fire your interns. They will help do all the button clicking and measurement, I think would be great, or research definitely is a role for interns as well.
What general skill sets would you say are important to be a successful social media manager?
Yeah. Well, a lot of them are just what makes people successful in general, like attention to detail or problem solving. But in particular, you and I were talking about this too, I think just good team building or, a good integrated marketer, someone who thinks that way. That's so important because I just listed off all the different stakeholders. You've got to loop in legal sometimes, you have to loop in customer service, there's marketing with their own dollars, but there's PR with the immersion and kind of the messaging. So it takes someone who can really bring people together to do that really effectively for a brand. So gotta have a good team builder there, someone who can navigate some pretty complex internal situations. And then I think going along with that is just someone who's nimble. We talked about editorial calendars, and sure, you can have a game plan, but something's gonna happen in real time, and you've gotta really think on your feet, and hopefully you've got a large team in place to help you work through that, but someone who can, both from an opportunistic standpoint, take advantage of something to your benefit, or worst case scenario, react to something really, complex too.
Right. And it would seem that, being a good writer would also be
Right.
important, but it's
Right.
also a different type of writing. Right?
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because, even as a PR agency, we would like to think we have very good writers on our team, but sometimes I have to coach our junior staff. Hey, listen, that could have been great for a press release or, a pitch, but this is totally different. We have 80 characters or less is really what you should be striving for on Facebook. So you've got to cut through the fluff. Consumers don't want to hear the fluff, and PR, we're so good at fluff,
Right.
But you've really got to cut through that a lot. So someone has to be a good writer, but that means something different for social, for sure.
Right. Well, this has been great insight. Is there
Perfect.
anything else in general about social media that you think the students would find interesting? Or?
Yeah. There are so many stats out there today, and, we try to stay on top of them as well. And, I'd encourage everyone to try to keep a hold on them too. I wouldn't drive yourself crazy with it. Your mind could go spinning every day if you read Mashable and all that and tried to pick up on every micro trend. But there is something to staying on top of trends so that you can be a better planner, on behalf of your organization. So for us, something that we would always tell organizations is to bake social into your marketing initiatives for sure, but also set aside planning and budget for this always on kind of approach, because you certainly can't just turn off social in between marketing programs.
Right.
And then if you can, try to set aside time or budget in a year to test and learn with new channels. I mean, you can't wait until it's been proven out with a case study to get on Facebook. You know, I know we all love a case study to prove out whether something's going to be successful, but with social and digital, it just moves too fast. So try to embrace a test and learn kind of culture, I think.
That's great. Ashley, thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.